Once upon a time in a bustling city, there were two kids who couldn't get along. They would constantly pick fights over silly things, and their feuds would end up getting them in trouble at school. One day, Tommy took it too far. He was fighting with Gary over who was better at soccer. And when Gary said he was better at soccer than Tommy, Tommy shoved him. It made Gary fall to the ground hard. Tommy thought he had gone too far this time. He felt bad about what he had done, but before he could apologize, the bell rang and he ran off to hide from Gary's angry face. Tommy went to his bedroom and laid down on his bed. Then he looked over and saw his feather pillow. An idea came to his mind that would make him feel a little bit better about what he had done. He picked up the pillow and squeezed it tight. He didn't know why, but it made him feel a lot better. He decided to take a nap. He put the pillow under his head and closed his eyes. He was dreaming of soccer games and being chased by Gary and his big feet. Then all of a sudden, he heard footsteps coming up the stairs to his room. He opened his eyes and looked around to see who was coming. Then he saw Gary standing at the door with his arms crossed. "You're going to pay for what you did," Gary yelled. He started throwing punches at Tommy, but Tommy blocked them all with his pillow. The pillow started falling apart from all the hits, and feathers started flying everywhere. "Get away!" Tommy yelled back. He started hitting Gary with the pillow, and they started having a pillow fight. At first, they were just having fun, but then Tommy got mad again. He wanted to hurt Gary like Gary had hurt him at recess. He kept hitting Gary with the pillow until he fell on the floor, out of breath. He ripped the last of the feathers off the pillow and started chasing Gary around the room. But Gary got away by hiding under Tommy's bed. As Tommy was getting ready to go out to find Gary, his mom walked into the room. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Feathers were stuck to her son's hair and all over her carpet. She asked them what had happened. They both started yelling at each other, pointing their feathery fingers like they were accusing each other of destroying Tommy's pillow. She didn't know who to believe. She started thinking maybe they should both go to their rooms and calm down. But then she stopped. She had an idea to teach them a very valuable lesson about bullying. "Okay, so you've trashed my house and ruined my son's pillow. I think we need to have a family meeting," she said. They all sat down at the kitchen table. She knew just how to make sure something like this never happened again. "I want you boys to go outside right now and clean up all those feathers. I don't want to see a single one inside this house again. Also, you two are grounded for the rest of the week." They both looked disappointed, but they knew their mom meant business. They went outside to start cleaning up the mess Tommy had made, but they quickly stopped. They realized it wasn't just feathers on her carpet. It was feathers all over their street. There were feathers on people's cars, stuck to trees, and even flying out of storm drains. But they didn't care. They were having way too much fun. They started chasing each other around the block, throwing handfuls of feathers in the air. "Stop! You can't do that!" someone yelled from inside their house. The two boys just laughed and kept throwing feathers. Soon, more and more kids came outside to see what all the commotion was about. The boys split up into teams. One team was Team Tommy, and the other was Team Gary. They divided up all the feathers and threw them into the air. At first, it was just a few kids having some fun, but pretty soon it was dozens of kids screaming at the top of their lungs as they threw feathers into the air. Some kids thought it was hilarious. Others started to get mad because feathers were sticking to their clothes and getting into their hair. People started running inside their houses to get away from the mess. But then something amazing happened. The wind shifted directions and started blowing all the feathers back towards the two teams. They were getting hit in the face, in the chest, and even in the hair. They were blinded by feathers. It was like a feather storm. All the kids started running around in circles, trying to get away from the flying feathers. But there were too many feathers. They couldn't escape the fluffy fury. One kid even tripped and fell down. When he did, feathers flew everywhere. It was like a mini feather tornado. The two teams stopped running around and looked at each other. They started laughing uncontrollably. It didn't matter which team you were on. Everyone was getting hit by feathers. The boys stopped laughing when they heard a loud voice. "What's going on here?" It was the principal. He was standing at the end of the street, looking like he had just run a marathon. His hair was messy, his clothes were torn, and feathers were stuck to his glasses. "I tried to come to school, but there were too many feathers in the air. It was impossible to see," he said. He looked at the two boys. "Do you know how much trouble you're in?" he asked. They knew they were in big trouble, but they also knew they weren't in any danger. They were safe with each other. All the kids started to leave. They had had enough feather fun for one day. Team Tommy and Team Gary walked back to the sidewalk. They were still holding handfuls of feathers. They looked at each other, and without saying a word, they started throwing the feathers in the air. They were having way too much fun to stop now. The principal sighed. Maybe he should have joined in on the fun instead of yelling at the kids. But then he thought about his car. It was probably covered in feathers. He started walking faster, hoping to get home before his wife left for work. Back on the sidewalk, Tommy and Gary continued throwing feathers into the air. They were both exhausted from all the running around. They started slowing down and dropping their hands to their sides. Pretty soon, all the feathers were gone. They looked around to see if anyone was watching. They didn't want their mom or the principal to see them throwing feathers. They started picking up the remaining feathers on the ground. "I'm sorry I shoved you at recess," Tommy said. "It's okay," Gary replied. "I'm sorry I picked a fight with you," Tommy said. "It's okay," Gary replied. "We can still be friends," Tommy said. "Yeah," Gary replied. They both smiled at each other. Just then, Gary's mom walked by. She was taking pictures on her phone. She stopped and asked them why they had so many feathers on them. They lied and said they found them on the ground. She wasn't buying it, but she didn't push them for answers. She knew they didn't want to talk about it. From that day on, Tommy and Gary were best friends. They never fought again, and whenever they saw a feather on the ground, they would pick it up and remember the day the city turned into a giant pillow fight and feathers flew everywhere.